I'm Mitch.
And I'm Kat.
And we're coming to you from Spring Arbor University Physical Therapy. Today we are going to talk about something that's really important.
What is that?
That's great that you asked me. We're going to talk about something called the core. And everybody talks about the core.
I know what that is.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's your abs.
Oh yeah, I'm going to work your abs. Nope, That's not what we're talking about. That's not the core that we need to talk about today. So there's actually an inner core and an outer core. So we're going to talk about this inner core thing today and the muscles that are involved with the inner core. And we're going to show you how to control those, use those, and why they're important. So that's the point of this video today. So the inner core muscles are comprised really of, we'll say, 4 different muscles. At the top of the core is the diaphragm, and everybody knows the diaphragm. You use that to breathe. So if you want to do a diaphragmatic breath, you just take a deep breath and your belly goes out, and then it goes in, and then you know you're working your diaphragm. Okay. Then there's another muscle called the transverse abdominis muscle, which is right here in the front. It's right underneath that six-pack you have right there.
Sure.
It's underneath it, and the fibers run this way, which are a little bit different than the six-pack, which runs this way. Okay, so they're just different type of alignment of the tissues of the fibers, and the reason for that is because when they contract differently than the six-pack, your rectus abdominis muscle. So when you pull the transversus, it actually pulls your belly button in. And I like to call it the skinny jean muscle. So when you pull your belly button in, normally when I'm trying to put some of my skinny jeans on, which I don't really have skinny jeans, but I've heard of people that have done this, that they pull their belly button on to get their skinny jeans on, and that is actually the transversus abdominis that they're activating. So we talked, number 1 muscle, the diaphragm, number 2 muscle, the transverse abdominis. There's a number 3 muscle, which is comprised of multiple muscles. We're going to group them together, called the pelvic floor. It's the bottom part of the pelvis. And then our muscle in the backside we're going to talk about is called the multifidi. So those are the 4 muscles that make up the inner core. Most of you haven't heard about those muscles because you don't really see those muscles when you're doing all your fancy poses. You know, you're doing your poses for in front of the mirror and stuff after you get out of the bathroom. You just don't see those muscles. They're not talked about, but they are super important. So the transversus, I do want to talk about how they can kind of work together. So when you pull your transversus abdominis muscle in, what it does is this muscle wraps all the way around to the backside of your body, and it hooks into something called the lumbodorsal fascia. So we're going to show a couple pictures of that right now. Okay, that was a picture of the transverse abdominis and also the lumbodorsal fascia. So like I said, this muscle wraps all the way around, and when you pull your belly button in, it actually pulls the lumbodorsal fascia in a horizontal direction, and it tightens it up in that direction, which is very important because that helps stabilize the spine, the lumbar spine. But also when you pull this belly in, it also reflexly contracts the bottom of your pelvic floor. So you pull this in, and your pelvic floor will contract at the same time. Why is this important? Because the pelvic floor, when it contracts, it pulls your tailbone down, and then it also pulls on that lumbodorsal fascia. So we're just going to give you a quick shot of what the pelvic floor looks like. Okay, that was the pelvic floor muscles, and when they contract, they contract up like this. Okay, so we've got top muscles, and we've got bottom muscles, and we got front muscles, and then these little muscles in the back called the multifidi, which we're going to take 1 second and show you a picture of those muscles. Okay, so those are the muscles of the inner core, and there's a nice analogy that you have about a pop can. Why don't you explain that pop can?
So I look at the inner core as like a pop can, in that the top of the pop can, before like one that hasn't been opened, you could stand on that pop can, you can take a lot of pressure, you can take a lot of force when all of the components are working together. So I think at the top of the pop can as your diaphragm, the bottom of the pop can as your pelvic floor, and the sides are your transverse abdominis and your multifidi. And so when they all work together, they keep that pressurized center, and it can withstand a lot of force, and it can, you can do just about anything with it. But as soon as, say, your diaphragm doesn't work or your transverse abdominis doesn't fire, then it's like you're poking a hole in one of the sides of that pop can, and then it just crushes and it fails, and it causes other muscles to work in their place, and that's how you get those back pain and like dysfunctional movements and things like that that can really cause other issues.
Yeah. I love the pop can. The pop can's a great way to visualize this. I also talk about it as God's weightlifting belt. So that muscle that I just showed you, we showed you just a couple slides ago, was the transversus abdominis, and it wraps around and it hooks to this lumbodorsal fascia. I like to think of this as a big weightlifting belt too. So just by simply pulling my belly button in, it activates this weightlifting belt, which I call God's weightlifting belt. So if you see bodybuilders or see weightlifters in the gym, they have these big, cinched down big belts. And what they're trying to do is increase intra-abdominal pressure, which actually works to help low back pain, and it helps the disc in the back. But we have our own built-in one, God's weightlifting belt, which is that transversus abdominis and all those inner core muscles. So I'm going to turn. So Kat's going to now teach me how to use these muscles and how we're going to work God's weightlifting belt. So teach me.
So if you came in and you were a patient of mine and I thought we need to work on inner core, then we're going to start by practicing on pulling our belly button in.
Okay.
So we just went through this elaborate description of what our inner core is, but really it's a simple exercise to activate it. So relax for just a moment.
Okay.
So in order to activate that transverse abdominis, all I need you to do is just pull your belly button towards your back and relax. Now see, your first reaction was probably to hold your breath.
Yeah.
But really, it's actually a small kind of movement of just the belly button coming in. You should almost feel those muscles like right below your belly button in between your hips kind of tighten.
Okay.
But what you shouldn't do is you shouldn't bend forward, and you shouldn't feel your back kind of go flat, and you certainly shouldn't lose your breath.
Right.
So it's a very simple exercise. Just pulling the belly button in. It's a very small movement.
Okay.
Like
or
so.
or it could be a big movement like this to this. So,
Right.
so but guess. Yeah.
Yep, so you just tighten up that belly button,
Pull it in.
and then you hold and you practice breathing.
Yep.
So first things first, you gotta get comfortable breathing. And so a good place to start is even when you're driving, so you're at a stoplight, practice holding your transverse abdominis for the duration of that stoplight. Or like sitting on the couch. Once that becomes really easy, then try holding your transverse abdominis, say when you're walking from one place to another. So in your office building, around your house, things like that. And then finally, we really get to use the transverse abdominis for its intended purpose to help us lift, move, things like that.
Right.
So say you need to pick a heavy object up off the floor. I want you to square up to that object. I want you to stand with feet shoulder width apart.
I'm ready.
Okay, now first thing I want you to do is activate your transverse abdominis. So pull that belly button in.
Is it pulled in? Does it look good?
Yes, good
Okay,
job.
good, yeah.
Well done.
Okay.
And so keeping that transverse abdominis tight, I want you to bend at the waist and the hips, or the hips and the knees, and go down. Pick up your object, now lift with your knees and not your back, keeping that core tight all the way through.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Same idea if you were to try and move an object from one countertop to another, always tighten beforehand. All the way through. Perfect.
Yeah, so when a lot of people, when they go to squat, they'll go down here and they kind of let their belly just hang out and everything they let it all go, which then creates a lot of instability in the back. It creates a lot more work for the exterior core. So by pulling your belly in and by going into this position, everything is kept nice and stable. Yeah, it's nice and tight and stable. So that's one of the things we want to make sure. And even rolling over in bed, if you have back pain, like we said, twisting and moving objects from side to side, pull your belly button in. Most exercises that are kind of in weird positions or just cleaning around the house or something, if you get into a weird position, something like that, you can always be safe by pulling your belly button in and then doing the activity. So, yeah. Okay.
So that is how we go about activating our transverse abdominis.
Yeah.
And its daily application in life.
Yeah, and I like to do I tell my patients 200 a day, and they all go, what? 200 a day?
too many.
That's way too many. And actually, I can drive from the clinic here to my house, and I can get 100 done easily. So you can really whip these off quick, and it's not that hard to get 200 in. And I tell you what, it is a great workout. Like when Kat was just teaching me how to do it, I was keeping it pulled in, and I was like 15 seconds into it, and my muscles are already quivering because I was working so hard. So, so it's not that hard to do it, and it's really beneficial. God's weightlifting belt, pop can. I think those are all great visuals of what you should do and why you should do it. So.
Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.